Some say that Total War Warhammer is the greatest revival of the Total War series since Shogun 2. Today I'm here to put that theory to the test as I go over what this game has to offer and what I think works and doesn't work. Is this Creative Assembly's biggest hit or biggest blunder? Let's find out, shall we?
A bloody age. An age of war.
Warhammer Total War was released as a PC exclusive on May 24th, 2016 and covers a new world for the Total War series. This version of Total War is pure fantasy, setting itself within the realms of Warhammer. Total War is a strategy game that pits the players in charge of several unique factions on a campaign map in order to conquer new lands, initiate diplomacy with other leaders, and fight battles on a real-time scale with enemies who oppose you. You may choose to play as dwarves, greenskins, the Empire, vampire counts, and the best faction in all Warhammer games, Chaos. More factions are available through DLC, although however Chaos was a pre-order bonus, so unless it's on sale, don't worry about buying it. Stupid on-disc DLC.
This takes me back.
The new big thing about this game in particular is magic. Magic is used to give buffs to your allies and men, and debuffs to your enemy. Certain magic abilities can even be used to cause massive missile strikes against your opponent. Not all factions have access to magic in the same way. As the Empire, the player will have several mages to command over the course of the game. Moving generals on the campaign map and into the wings of magic can grant them magical powers if a fight is present in the same area. You can use these spells to wreak absolute havoc on your enemy, but it isn't game-breaking. Although you use magic and destroy multiple targets of infantry, it doesn't outright wipe them out. The player must be careful of when they use magic and, more importantly, how they use it. As in, it can have some pretty devastating effects if you use it in the wrong area. Say, in your own lines. On the campaign select screen, you'll have a selection between your factions. Once you choose one, you can then pick a general to start out with. Now, instead of the previous Total War game starting you out with the same general in every campaign, you are free to select 2 to 3 generals, depending on what faction you pick, that'll have their own perks and quirks. The generals that you don't select will still be available later on in your campaign, but some make you do certain requirements, like getting your starting general to a certain rank, for example. Every faction will start out with an introduction that guides the player through battles and the beginning of their campaign. While I do appreciate Creative Assembly implementing the intros, I found the campaign tutorial rather long and drawn out, so thankfully you can turn it off if you get the general idea of how to start your game. Before I get into what I like and dislike about the game, I want to touch upon the last aspect of Total War Warhammer, the battles. On the campaign map, the player can choose to select a province to move to and initiate an attack. The player can also attack an army in the field of battle. What happens then is a real-time battle occurs, where you send your lines against theirs and duke it out to see who can outthink and outfight who. Now that you get the gist of things, let's dive further into this game, shall we? Upon starting the game, you may notice new additions, such as the quest battles. Quest battles are fights in which you earn loot and experience from playing in them. Sadly, as the dwarves, I never got to enjoy them as much as I wanted, because they play out exactly the same way every time. I would lead my forces to the quest site and know exactly who would flank me, who would need to be in what position every time I played this battle. Playing through the campaign and completing small quests and objectives alike is a great way to keep money afloat depending on who you're playing as, but the quest battles, while flashy, don't have much replayability to them whatsoever. A lot of details and features from Shogun 2 and many other past Total War titles have been implemented in Warhammer, which I greatly appreciate. Repression has been brought back, which was handy in Shogun 2 since Rebels suck and always will. I also like how they brought back the unique intro cinematic, but they still don't have general speeches. The various factions that surround you all look and sound amazing too. They all have great personality when fighting and walking around the campaign map. Each faction has their own style of buildings, for example. Dwarves live in the mountains, so they'll have a lot of mines and trinket markets. It's too bad they couldn't bring the cosmetic touches back from Rome 2 so I could see them, but it's not really something that we need, although it would be really cool if I could see it. The vampire counts have more sacrifice pits and spooky castles, which look amazing in their own territory. Chaos plays like a nomadic tribe, so recruiting units is used as a campsite instead of a traditional barracks in a city. Where the uniqueness in Warhammer comes into play, in my opinion, is in the research panels. The dwarves have a more traditional Total War look to it, while the counts must research a specific technology branch before they can research the rest of that block. Similar to how you needed to research agriculture in Civilization 2 to unlock the rest of the tech tree, only you do that 4 times for each block of tech. The Empire requires that you build certain buildings in order to get new technology. All these ways to play with armies shouldn't leave anyone bored for a good long while. The various army stances have been put into the game also, as it was in Rome 2 and Attila, force march, raid and ambush, and further makes some armies different from others. Dwarves and greenskins have an added army stance that allows them to bury themselves in the ground and travel in the underways, enabling travelling under mountain passes, being able to avoid dangerous weather conditions, and it also rids them of attrition as well. Every faction also has a unique way of dealing with battle victory as well. As the dwarves, you may enslave captives to get more money, but have a leadership penalty, or kill them and gain leadership, while the greenskins can choose to outright eat their captives for bonus replenishment. There are a few things, however, that I can't help but feel irk me. Even though the factions are unique and interesting, I found that they all suffer from a similar problem. The game is just too easy. In previous Total War games, you could conquer whomever you wanted, and now that's changed. You may only capture and hold cities that the games want you to, in order to achieve total victory. Now there are positives and negatives to this, and here's why I'm indifferent to this system. In Rome 2, for example, you could play as Athens, for instance, and go through multiple treaties and trade agreements with multiple empires. A faction in the Deep East may have heard of you and declare war. It's odd that they would do this, but trust me, it's happened before. And it would take 50 plus turns for that army to even show up in Egypt before it could make it over the seas to your coastal capital. It was random and made no sense why he would do all of this. If that's what they were trying to prevent, then they've done that very well. Now in Warhammer, your main objective as dwarves is to just conquer every territory listed on your objective panel and all of the greenskin provinces. This keeps the game focused and direct. I can't deny that I do like some aspects to this system, but at the same time, a faction who you can't conquer can still declare war on you. So still going off my dwarven example, the cities of Avaland are almost right next to my capital. If he declares war on me, I'd need to keep a permanent army stat close by just in case they'd make a return. Upon further experimentation, I learned that you can raise their cities, but if they have a general nearby, he can reclaim that land to himself. On one hand, I do see how this is a nice change, but at the same time, I would rather just conquer him and be done with it. I also found that Rebellion isn't that interesting and not so demanding of the player's attention like it was in every other Total War game. Since most rebels just raid and sack or raids rather than claim your cities, there was never a time where I was shocked or surprised when a rebellion actually happened, since there wasn't much they could do anyway. They attack, you auto-resolve, no penalty. Another change I didn't really like was the way battles work in general. In most cases, a battle is fought on a narrow-like field where every army just charges into one another without really having a lot of flanking opportunities. Underway battles are the worst at this. I'm not saying that flanking is impossible, but the way the borders on the end of a field are placed just makes it feel way too streamlined. This streamlining goes even further into quite possibly the worst siege battles I've ever seen in a Total War game. The majority of siege battles are fought going against one wall with several towers on it with units occupying the walls. The king of siege battles in Total War were always Shogun 2 and Medieval 2. In those games you fought at a real castle with all 4 or so walls on it, making flanking and maneuvering very important. In Warhammer, you just suicide charge into archer, musket and tower fire. By the time you get to the tower, your forces are all but halfway dead, and it does make me wonder why I even went through the effort of hitting fight battle instead of auto-resolve. Oh. And why is it so important that I have to wait 1 to 2 turns to make a siege tower, yet ladders spawn from nowhere once you arrive at the walls? Battles do feel very gritty, and the sounds of clashing steel and metal really feel like I'm present in this war. The music has definitely improved since Rome 2's lackluster tracks. I guess Richard does get a little bit better with every release. I love the sound of the cannon fire, the groans and screams of the dwarves and the goblins alike. I love the bellowing voices of the gods and monsters that you may control as well. Yep, gods and monsters. Monsters like ogres and beasts can also be recruited into your army and soak up a lot of damage before dying or retreating. These can range from, as I said, ogres, giant spiders from the orcs, maybe even dragons from chaos. They are really cool to use, but they also are kinda easily repelled, as dwarves all they ever had to do was get iron drakes and fire upon them until they melted away or ran for their lives. On a more positive note, when you field larger armies, you do have an expanded map area to fight on in battle. Once they do open up, this Total War just feels right, because of all the work they put into how this game sounds and feels. The flanks, the basics of what makes a good Total War game do shine there at least. And then when you watch the fights up close, it just feels nostalgic. Although some of the kill animations do look really odd. While I do like the amount of customization with the generals this time around, I quickly noticed that even though you earn new weapons for your generals similar to an RPG like Dragon Age, that the generals upon dying just come back to life, similar to how Octavian could in the Emperor Edition campaign of Rome 2. I was desperately trying to keep Grombrindle alive, as he's my favourite general for the dwarves. But once I lost him to a Chaos Horde, I quickly noticed he was just exploring the Silver Road back at the capital, just loving his day off. I called him back to action instantly and noticed the same logic applies to most dwarven generals also. The real lack of tension is present when you see stuff like that. If generals can't die in a sense, and rebels barely overtake your cities, then there isn't much penalty for mismanagement and poor decision making. The customization is still very in-depth and reminds me of Shogun 2 in a lot of good ways. Legendary lords and spies get all nice kinds of spells, or runecraft if you're a dwarf, which makes it all the more rewarding if you unlock these and let your generals equip them. A problem I once encountered with this, however, is once a general equips something, the game won't tell you who it's equipped by, so it's just a frantic search of seeing who has what, just so you can find something to give your general that doesn't already have dibs. Thankfully that was patched later on though. The game does have some nice structure though. After you complete a certain amount of main objectives, the player is warned of the mighty forces of chaos approaching from the north. This made me instantly perk up and made me want to finish my greenskin war in a massive hurry. Upon getting halfway through it, I was greeted with chaos, however not from the north, but from the west? Okay. These armies raided and razed nearly all my cities I worked so hard to get, but after a good 10 plus turns, I just let him run through my cities until they got to my capital, and I just trapped him, defeated him in combat. I did this with all the starting chaos forces and laughed my ass off at how easy it was beginning to feel. I reclaimed all my cities, confederated with the rest of the dwarf clans, and got to the endgame where chaos finally decided to join the party. They mostly did the same thing as the western armies did, and so I just used the same line of thought. I raised armies to 40 stacks and beyond and met them head on in the far north. I'd lost my fair share of battles, but soon enough I prevailed. One of your final objectives is to weaken Archaon the Ever-Chosen, and defeat the rest of his generals, and how you do this is very simple. You play tag with him, of course. I was allied with nearly every single faction in this game possible, and all we did was play tag with Chaos until we finally caught his fleeing armies. I made sure they were gone after defeating a few more Chaos Gods, and the game just ended. No ending cutscene, no nothing. Fun. I must say, however, Creative Assembly have fixed an issue in late game that I found rather annoying in Shogun 2's Realm Divide. In Realm Divide, the Shogunate and the rest of the factions would never pay any attention to any other superpower rising in strength. The Shogunate never once called for any other clans to help him in a war, and not once called me to assist in a massive war against the dominant superpower. I found it silly that everyone is waiting for you specifically to rise up and take the seat of the Shogun. Here, everyone tried their best to band together to fight Chaos as one, and it felt great knowing that I wasn't the only one who was going to be fighting. It felt like I was playing in a fantasy world where everyone unites to fight the final foe. This is where I'll speak of diplomacy, as I found this once useful feature troublesome. I don't think I've ever seen a Total War where diplomacy is almost handled for you rather than you seeking out treaties for the benefit of your people instead. As the dwarves, the fellow clans will pretty much hand out trade to you along with alliances and almost every agreement under the sun. You don't need to initiate talks of trade or anything, the other clans will just do it for you. Getting trade with other main factions like the Empire and Elves is almost impossible until late game where everyone is trying to get along, which at the time felt really good, but for the early and mid game it felt like a joke. I understand that you need more trade depots, but even when you get more, they won't want to trade with you anyway, since every race hates each other to some extent. To reiterate some points, I really like the look and feel of the combat. Combined with some nice sound design, it makes it feel even more intense. The magic looks amazing and plays well with the Empire, although I wasn't really that good at using it personally, I did find its inclusion very interesting. The campaign map I feel was very non-consequential and really lacked any sort of urgency, although I did like the colourful nature of the map. I love how diverse the terrain is, from the snowy northern mountains to the lush green forests of the west. It all makes it seem like it's a real, living, breathing fantasy world. I also like the touch that if Chaos raids mass parts of land, it becomes Chaos lands too. I feel the real effort went into graphics and unit design in this in particular game. I'm mostly speaking in general terms when I talk about this game, but there are some things I want to speak about before I conclude this review. I feel like some elements of the game really feel underdeveloped, like Lords, which in this version of Total War is their spies and agents. I found their inclusion dull and not really fun. They can be used for combat very effectively, but if you're playing as the dwarves, you feel like they don't even need to be there, unless you want to use them in combat. I found parts of the combat largely unbalanced, as goblins and greenskins can field massive amounts of archers at the player, and there isn't much the dwarves can do about it. It wouldn't matter how strong my infantry are, there was nothing I could do about those damn Wazzicks. It's also a shame that seasons aren't present in the game, along with battle speeches as I said before. However, for what Warhammer is, I can't help but feel that the game's just average. It does take some interesting steps in the right direction, but is halted by some very strange design decisions along the way. What this game definitely got right was the factions, however, and I'll cover the most known things about 3 factions just to give you more of an idea of what they're like. The dwarves on the campaign map have what's known as the Book of Grudges. Every now and again, a new grudge is added for you to complete, and with every new grudge comes more debuffs, such as public order penalties. This gives the player something to try and maintain, but I feel that the book is often overzealous, with tasking the players to do some ridiculous things, like carrying out assassination attempts with spies you rarely use. They've also been known to bug out or be random, which I think is really silly, when it just pops out of nowhere and gives you some public order penalties just because, hey, here's a grudge. When you're presented with a real grudge, however, as in if an enemy destroys an army in battle or captures your city, you will need to seek out revenge. That's when I think the Book of Grudges really works. The greenskins are always ready to fight, but if you keep them waiting, they will start fighting amongst themselves, making you more aggressive both in battle and in the campaign map. The vampire counts can spread vampiric corruption and raise the dead of friend and foe alike from a previously fought battle on the campaign map, which is really awesome and fun to use. But as I said, the game at times does feel undercooked, and when the reward for all your efforts is a blank screen detailing everything you did to its finest detail, I doubt I'd want to go back and do it all again. Luckily, the game does remain a little fun here and there, which will motivate you to try different factions. They're all unique, as I said, and I do encourage you, if you already have this game, to keep playing as different factions to get the most out of your experience. Is this game a blunder or a big hit? That is the question I'm trying to answer. In fact, I've been trying to answer it over the last couple of days, and I really think it's a pretty looking average experience. While the game is fun to look at, to play is a different story. I do find the game fun at times, but that's at the cost of not caring too much about rebellion, your general abilities, etc. I'm also surprised that you can rename cities to whatever you want along with your units, but you can't colour them like in real life Warhammer, or in the previous Warhammer games. That would have been amazing to do in my campaigns. That's all I can really say. that this game is undercooked but still fun at times. If you're interested in Total War or Warhammer in general, then you may want to wait for a sale before picking this game up.